International. We've got a fantastic final speaker today. I've just had the privilege of spending some time with her, and I've been watching her over time. She is definitely shaping our future. But before we get to that, a great part of our session is our sponsor, and I'd like to thank Visit Milwaukee for doing so. And rather than being up here in person, they're going to just share a brief video with us a moment. So if I could have the video. Thank you, Milwaukee. And thank you for making this afternoon possible. If you've looked at the conference, the structure of the conference, it's been a lot about reinvention or innovation, as we've been talking a lot about, of ourselves, of our organizations, and even science and engineering as well. So what we want to do to close out the conference today is open up that lens even larger and look at what's going on in the world around us. How is the world transforming? How is it reinventing itself? As I mentioned, Robin Chase, she's our speaker today. She is a powerful force. She's a mastermind in this area. She is one of the co-founders of Zipcar. How many of you have actually used Zipcar? All right. Millennials are definitely using it. Us older folks, maybe not so much. But Buzzcar, she also Go Loco. And she's also on the board of trustees of Venium, which is really about connecting the vehicles through data, networks, et cetera. So she is thinking about how does the future actually become reality today. And she's running into the issues of social justice, creativity, innovation, et cetera. How does all this come together? She's got a very active mind, and you'll see that in the presentation today. So her topic talks about creating Meadows for innovation, where you bring the power of people together. And that is one of the things that we do well, is bring the powers of people together. So as you listen to her talk today, I encourage you to think about it for yourself and for the organization which you work in, but also the ecosystem that you represent in your organization, and then our organizations of organizations. So with that, Robin, we'd love to have you talk.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for staying to me. I know I'm at the end, but I'm hoping that this is going to be worth it. So I want to talk about a new organizational structure that people are using to build brand new businesses. It's changing the way we work, and ultimately it will shape entire economies because we're completely moving this way. So to tell this story, I'm going to start with Zipcar, and then we will move forward. So if I think about Zipcar and why we had a high likelihood of success. So I founded this company back in 2000. The first thing we did is we leveraged excess capacity. So if you think about the way you used to be able to consume a car, you had two options. Option number one was you would buy the entire car, cost $9,000 a year on average, yet you use it only 4% of the time. And it's the second most expensive thing that we buy, and it's idle 96% of the time. Or you could do car rental, in which case you had to buy it in these 24-hour bundles. Whether you wanted it for 2 hours or for 26, you still had to buy it in these 24-hour bundles. So both ways in which people consume cars, they always had to buy more than they wanted. So I knew that if we were going to sell cars by the hour and by the day, economics were on our side because the system was so flooded with this unused stuff. The second thing we did is we built a platform for participation. By which I mean, if you think about car rental today, I just rented one a couple days ago, it's still taking you 10 to 15 minutes to rent it at best, even though 17 years ago, we made it take a few seconds. And how did we do that? Is that we put the customer directly up close to the vehicle, and we gave them the power of the back office. And we made complex things very simple. And we did that with our platform and our app. And the third thing we did is we thought of our customers as our members and our collaborators. And again, if I go to the car rental model, just picture there's a counter, and I'm the company, and you guys are renting, and I'm thinking, I know that you're going to have scratches or have car accidents, and you're not going to tell me about it. I don't trust you. And you are looking at me, the company, and you're thinking, whoa, you're trying to upsell me immediately, get me to buy insurance I don't need. You're going to charge me 3 times what it's supposed to be for fuel. Like, I definitely don't trust you either. So it's very adversarial. Zipcar took away the counter and said, you know what, we're all in this together. We are together. We're going to collaborate. We're going to ask you to do things that we used to do. We're going to trust you to walk around the car and tell us if there's any problems with it. We're going to trust you to use a fuel card that we're leaving in the car to fill it when it gets to a quarter tank. You're going to tell us, you know, what are the best cars, what are the best locations. You really are our co-creators, our collaborators. And these photos for me are the example of that incredible relationship we built with our customers. These are people leaving the hospital with their firstborn children, and they're thinking, wait up, let's take a photo and mail it to Zipcar. I didn't do that when I was leaving the hospital with my firstborn children. And I found this cartoon just a couple years ago. Here's Moses coming down out of the mountain. Is there a section on the bottom for comments? So today, even with God, we're thinking, of course, we're co-creators, we're co-producers. The idea that I'm just going to sit back and wait passively, that's not a thing. And if you think of this word consumer, doesn't it have a 1950s ring? Consumer? Like, I don't think of myself as a 1950s consumer. So these 3 elements, excess capacity being harnessed on a platform for participation, inviting in the collaboration of others, these are the building blocks of this new organizational structure that I'm calling Peers, Inc. And we're really inventing a new collaborative economy and reinventing capitalism. And I want to take you through this story and imprint it on you. So if you think of these companies that we've been talking about for the last 15 years with awe, like, oh my God, what amazing companies, all of these companies are taking that shape. And I want to put in there the free and open source movement is a platform that's leveraging excess capacity and inviting in engineers. Massive online open courses are that. When we talk about co-housing and co-work and co-anything, crowdfunding, it's a Peers Inc. collaboration. When we enjoy Yelp, or we talk about Bitcoin and the blockchain, all of these are Peers Inc. collaborations. If I think about this idea of excess capacity, it is fundamentally an act of sharing. Because you're saying, I alone am not controlling this asset only, I'm having to share it with other people. Because I'm leveraging this excess capacity. And my favorite example here would be bed sharing. I don't know if you guys do any bed sharing. I do a lot of bed sharing because I travel all the time. And I get to stay at friends' houses in their multi-purposed home office. And if I'm extra lucky, I get a double bed, and I think, yeah, this is my bed. This is the kind of friend's house I want to stay at. And if I'm unlucky, they told the teenager, you go sleep someplace else, Robin will sleep in your room, and I think, ick, no way, this is why I'm going to a hotel. And so hotels are honestly bed sharing. And when I did Zipcar, I would tell my staff, don't call it car sharing, no one knows what it is, and imagine if we called hotels bed sharing. It's the exact same business model, trying to maximize the return on those assets over a 7-day week. So I went and did some research, and I said, what is the largest bed sharing in the world? And the Intercontinental Hotels has been around for 65 years, 650,000 rooms in 100 countries. And we can know that was a really hard job because Hilton has been doing it for 93 years and isn't as big. And then you know what I'm going to say? Airbnb, in its 4th year, had 650,000 rooms. And so I say, wow, like, oh my God, what happened? How can I do this? What the heck is going on? This is a shocking, shocking slide. And what went behind that is the revenues. Like, they actually did this in 4 years. Couchsurfing, where no money changes hands, in its 9th year had 2.5 million rooms for rent in every country. So the question is, what is going on? How can we understand it, and how can we do that? One more point. Airbnb just had a market round in a venture round in March, $31 billion relative to those other guys. And Airbnb, I think, is 7 years old now, 7 or 8. So what's going on? So if I think about why did we ever invent companies and institutions and governments? We invented them to do things that we as individuals can't do. And I think of those as industrial strengths. So If you want to do something that costs millions of dollars, don't ask Robin Chase. I don't have millions of dollars. I have to put together a company or an institution to do that. If it's something that's going to require lots of kinds of intelligence, I might be brilliant at 2 things, but it's going to take 20 things. We have to put together an organization to do that. If it's something that requires standards or standardization, I, Robin Chase, can't make anybody do anything. Maybe my children when they were young. But you need to have a larger entity with like heft to say, here's what it's going to be. And these are typically all kind of bound up in kind of brand promise around that name, and they're global. On the flip side, individuals actually do a whole bunch of things way better. And I want to put into those individuals local NGOs and local companies. And what do? They do localization and adaptation and customization really well. And if you think of the last 150 years of industrial capitalism, it has been all about ripping out the customized, localized, and specialized to create very standardized products, get those economies of scale and the cost down. Big companies can do that work. They hate it. They hate doing it because it costs too much money. They don't want to fiddle with those parts. If we put these 2 things together, they're very, very complementary. And so what has changed is now the internet exists, and dealing with lots of small parts is not a drama. And so we have this potential for this brand new organizational model that could never exist before, where we can get the best of both worlds, where we can get the best of this industrial strength as produced by the Inc. on a platform for participation, and the best of the small, unique, and customized by the peers that are developing this diversity of offering. And to simplify this thought, I think of it as a kind of yin and yang. It's very complementary, very symbiotic, and each side has to leave enough value on the table for the other side, otherwise they don't want to participate. And it's all kind of swimming in this sea of excess capacity. So let me go through these things. So excess capacity, I love dealing with excess capacity because it's incredibly resource efficient, and I'm an environmentalist, and it's really cost efficient, and I'm a business person. So how am I defining that? It's something that already exists, it's already been paid for, but there's more value there. And as I go through this talk, I'm going to be trying really hard to give you a huge diversity of examples, because if you take one thing away from this talk, it is thinking about excess capacity and how you can leverage it. So once you find it, what do you do with it? One, you could slice it, and that's what Zipcar did. It took this big asset, the car, and said, we're going to give it to you. You can only pay it by the hour. We're going to slice it up in these little bite-sized chunks. Or you could aggregate this excess capacity, which is what Airbnb did. It took those million little tiny spaces around the world, put them all on one platform with one insurance product, similar ways to pay and to look, so I can compare and contrast. And it's wholly different than a million bed and breakfasts. And the third way, which is kind of the most incredible, is you just open it up and you say, hey guys, what ideas do you have? And my example there would be open data. So this report from McKinsey points out that 40 countries have opened up 1 million data sets, and that there's $3 trillion worth of value there. And just think about this. This is data that was collected by the government or by the transit authority or by the tax system for themselves. They paid for it, they used it, they enjoyed it, it was great, it was in a file drawer someplace or in the cloud. And by making an open API, which would be this platform for participation, there's $3 trillion worth of value to unlock out of there. So this is taking scarcity and making it abundant. It's taking nothing and turning it into something. So what does the Inc. do? The platform delivers platformness. And what is platformness? It organizes all the small parts. It makes complex things really simple. And incredibly importantly, it gives the power of the large over to the small, which is what I want to say is one of the things that you guys are doing. And while you're doing it, you can get these economies of scale and deliver high growth. And my favorite example here is a company called BlaBlaCar. There's a French company, and it is real ride sharing. I live in Paris, and I'm driving to Berlin, and I have my 3 empty seats. And with BlaBlaCar, I can share those seats. I want to call your attention to the growth curve. Successful platforms, this is what they look like. This company started in 2006. You have to iterate, 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 iterate to get your platform just right. And when you get it right, it completely takes off. And so today, they're moving more than 4 million people every month, which is the same as 10,000 trains or 10,000 planes. Yet they didn't lay a track. They didn't buy a plane. They didn't buy a rail car. How did they do it? They harnessed excess capacity on a platform for participation, invited in the collaboration of others. So what do the peers do? The peers deliver diversity. And for me, this is why this organizational structure beats out every other one, because it is finally able to enjoy, capitalize, leverage, harness that diversity. And it gives them incredible amounts of innovation and builds in resilience and redundancy. And my example here would be smartphones and apps. The smartphone is the platform. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to build a platform, and the operating system, even more, a huge amount of work and effort. Whereas the apps, anybody could build an app. And what's incredible is in the last 10 years since smartphones existed, there have been more than 2 million apps that have been made. Sure, there's a lot of dupes in there, but imagine what's happened is they've opened up, semi-opened these smartphones, and it's individuals with their own personal life experience in their own personal sector, understanding the individual problems and opportunities. What can I do with this phone? And they've come up with these millions of ways. It would never have happened. Like Steve Jobs would never have thought of that. He's brilliant, not brilliant enough. You know, Apple, they could never have thought of it. It required this openness and this beauty of the diversity of everyone with their life to break this. And if I think about it, and maybe I said this sentence, it really was probably the most creative 10 years in civilization. Like a huge amount of diversity of things got blossomed there. So if I think about this organizational structure, it has these characteristics that are so amazing, I think of them as miraculous. And before I tell you what those miracles are, I want to really depress you. So when I tell you the miracles, you're going to feel, this incredible relief. And the most depressing thing I can think of, climate change. And so this is a chart here of, was this year, on a global perspective, hotter or colder than the 1900 to 2000s average? And I would just want to point out to you that if you've been born since 1980, you have never lived in an average year for the planet. And here's what 2015 looked like. This is 2016. This is the latest data so far for 2017. It is terrifying. And so scientists are telling us that we're going to go, under business as usual, the planet's temperature will increase by 5 to 6 degrees centigrade. If you're like me, you have no idea what does it mean to warm a planet by 5 or 6 degrees. And I'm going to point out that we are now approaching 1 degree planetary warming to date. So what does it feel like to warm a planet by 5 or 6 degrees? So I went and did some more research. The last time it was minus 4.5 degrees was the last ice age 20,000 years ago. And I'm thinking about where I'm standing right now. If this is kind of small for you to see, but it's the skylines of Toronto, Chicago, Boston, and Montreal. My bed in Boston would be there under ice. So these are the glaciers on top of us. And where I slept in Boston was under 1.25 kilometers of ice. So if you want to know what does it feel like to warm by 4.5 degrees over 20,000 years, that's the difference between us right here now under kilometers of ice and glaciers to today. We are going forward that amount in 85 years. So lest you have any doubt that this is a crisis, this is for me my pure proof point. Like, what is that going to be? So my friend Benny Banerjee at Stanford has this great sentence. You can't solve exponential problems with linear solutions. And indeed, that is how we are addressing this blasted climate problem with these pathetic linear solutions. And I want to say, you know what? Try Peers, Inc. And now for these miracles that I know you are ready for. So miracle number 1. Because we're leveraging excess capacity, we can defy the laws of physics. What do I mean by that? Imagine if in 2000, instead of saying I'm going to invent Zipcar, I said, OK, I'm going to build the largest hotel chain in the world. I'm going to build 650,000 rooms in 4 years around the world. Everyone in this room, every banker, my husband would have said, Robin, physically impossible. You cannot build 650,000 rooms in 4 years around the world. You can't, go find the land, have the architect design it, go get it financed, build it, put the furniture in, have the staff come, hire staff, put in people. You can't do that in 4 years. Physically impossible. And here's what business as usual asset building would look like over 6 years. And here's what Airbnb did. And why? Because they leveraged existing excess capacity on a platform for participation and invited the collaboration of others. So I'm into transportation, and when people talk about high-speed rail up and down California, I think, whatever. You put the shovel in the ground today, and we won't see any CO2 reductions for 20 years. I don't care. We have to do stuff that is right now, today, with the assets we have at hand. Miracle number 2. Because we're building on platforms for participation, we can tap exponential learning. So if you think about what is learning, learning is how many iterations can I get on something. And so we think about companies can learn faster than individuals, and platforms can tap a huge number of iterations. And so my favorite example here would be how quickly can you learn a foreign language? And the unit of measurement is a semester of college, 130 hours. It used to be that the Rosetta Stone would do it for you in 54 hours. And they're incredibly expensive. And if your boss were paying, you'd say, yes, I want to spend $1,000 for a semester on tape and do this for 54 hours. It's great. My new favorite company is Duolingo. They do free online language learning. I was talking to their CEO. He says every single question they ask is an A/B test. And within 24 hours, 150,000 people would have taken their A/B test, and they'll know which is the better way to teach the language. And so they now have it down to 34 hours in which they will reliably teach you a semester of a language. And when I say reliably, this company is a little more than 3 years old now, and they are now teaching 50 million people actively every month. The number of people who have signed up is like 200 million, but actively every month, 50 million people are doing it. And I just want you to consider, what was the excess capacity? How Robin Chase failed on tests no one cared about for 58 years. And Louis Van Naan said, whoa, there's some really interesting information in that. I'm going to capitalize on that information, and I'm going to make our tool better and better and better. And the other way he used excess capacity was, if we think about languages, it comes in language pairs. My native tongue is English, and I'm learning French. 2 years ago, he opened up the processes of Duolingo and said, hey, you guys, anybody can put language pairs onto my platform. Of the 50 million, 50% of those people are learning languages that Duolingo did not invent. Miracle number 3. Because we're working with a diversity of peers, the right person will appear. And I don't mean Superman, like, so what? He's strong and he can fly, but everyone in this room is way better than him right away because you have your smartphones. And so you know what was the history, who are the experts, what's the weather, and what's the best path, got it all down. My example here would be, this happened to me personally, but this isn't my photo. I was driving from Boston to my in-laws in New Hampshire, where we had driven 200 times. My husband insists on using Waze. We're in a full car, and there was a foot of snow falling that Wednesday afternoon. It was terrifying driving. And my son's in the front seat, and he said, whoa, look at that. And I'm peering around thinking, OK, are there like 2 deer jumping across the street? No, there were 2 cars that had collided in front of us and were doing this slow, distant spin in the thick snow. And Waze said, caution, accident ahead. And it was only at 2 lanes, and the guy next to me also was using Waze, and he pushed to accident. So another example here is Waze. I just met the co-founder of Waze a month ago, and they started in January of 2009, and they are 300 million people using that service worldwide today. And one more example, Obama in December 2017 says, you know what, I think I'm going to normalize relations with Cuba. In 6 months, there were 2,000 listings. You cannot do this any other way. So the point to get is that Peers Inc. is a collaboration. None of these miracles can happen if you don't have the 2 sides. So we can have exponential growth because we have the platform that organized and unleashed this excess capacity, and the peers doing the co-investment. We can't tap exponential learning unless we have the hundreds of thousands of crazy ways, or unique, or customized, or localized, or adaptive ways that the peers are doing things. And the platform that's doing the analysis and saying, here's best practice, I'm going to make it easy. Here's worst practice, I'm going to make that impossible. The platform is the only one that has visibility. And the right person won't appear if you don't have the platform doing its supercomputing analysis and to say, here is the needle out of the haystack that you need right now. So I'm fully persuaded that we have left industrial capitalism behind. And how am I defining industrial capitalism? It's when the way to extract the most value out of assets was to have a very thick barrier around it. And those barriers were patents and copyrights and trademarks and certifications. And that used to be the best way to extract value. But today we're moving into this new collaborative economy where it is very, very fuzzy. Like, do I work for the company or not work for the company? Who owns this asset? Where does the data come from? Is it work time or personal time? Is this residential or is this commercial? It's all a big kind of swamp. And I'm going to leave you with 4 principles that for me are all truisms. And if you agree that these are truisms, then you, like me, know we have seen the end of industrial capitalism and we are now on this new collaborative economy. So the 4 things. Number 1, shared networked assets deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. They're used more efficiently, or they're opened up and brand new value is extracted. So shared networked assets deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. This second one you guys know because you're scientists, or you work with scientists. No matter how smart you are in this room, we know statistically there's more people outside of this room that are smarter. There's have to be. The internet exists, we can find those people. So more networked minds are smarter, more creative, more innovative, more adaptive, more local, more anything you want than people in this room, in this company, in this city, in this state, in this country. It's a fact. So more networked minds are better than fewer proprietary ones. If we think about the benefits and opportunities of shared open assets, they are larger than the problems associated with shared open assets. The people who did not invest in Zipcar, they said, Robin, everyone's going to have these car accidents, it's going to ruin the cars, it'll never work. In fact, there's a very small percentage of people who do ruin the cars, and those problems come right up, and we penalize them, and then we ship them, we say, you're doing it too often, you're kicked out. Meanwhile, there's 1 million people who are sharing cars in cities around the world. It works. And then lastly, I'm really selfish. I don't care about anyone else. I only do things for myself. When I participate in these, I always get more than I give. I edit 2 lines of Wikipedia, and I, Robin Chase, have access to 5 million entries of the world's encyclopedia. So I put in my little piece, and I get access to the whole. So I look at these 4 things, and I said, these are true. The internet exists. These things are now true. So if I think about the times that we live in, which are, what's up with climate change? What's up with the future of work? What's up with the future of capitalism? Technology is moving too fast. What I know for sure is that this particular Peers Inc. organizational structure is the only one that allows us to experiment, iterate, adapt, and evolve at the pace required. And so I did write a book on this topic, but for you guys, what you need to be thinking about is you are the platforms, and who are your peers? What is it that you are doing that the small can't? How are you empowering the smaller guys? How are you organizing them? How are you making the complex simple? Where's excess capacity that you can tap? Not just within your own organizations, and not just within your peers, but within ecosystems and with the processes and how things work about. How can you unlock that? How can you harness and unlock that? And this is the end of part of my talk, but I have one more treat that you guys get to vote on. I'm doing a lot of work on the future of self-driving cars in cities. And it's a 4-minute video that collapses a lot of information. But you guys get to vote on whether you want to see that. So do you want to see that? OK. So it goes fast. Let's go.
Self-driving cars could make cities more livable, sustainable, equitable, and just. Fully automated self-driving cars will be available for sale in cities by 2020. They have very different economics than our current cars, and so won't fit in well with today's rules of play. I see 2 distinct possibilities for our automated car future: heaven or hell. We get to choose. Forward-thinking leadership is going to make all the difference. We get hell by taking a wait-and-see approach. In this future, people buy AVs instead of today's cars. For trips, once you get to your destination, instead of paying for parking downtown, it'll be cheaper to have your empty AV circle the block or drive back home. The same is true for stores. It could be cheaper to have a drugstore car drive to customers than to pay for retail space downtown. Today, 75% of all cars on the road have one occupant, the driver. In the future, as we add more cars operating with their different economics, 50% of the cars will have no people in them, running low-value errands or avoiding parking. Meanwhile, all the taxi, bus, shuttle, and truck drivers will lose their jobs. We'll also lose about 60% of our tax revenue that finances road infrastructure because AVs are electric, don't park, and don't get parking tickets. Our roads and bridges get a whole lot worse. We definitely don't want the hell scenario. We get heaven by taking a proactive approach. Over 1 million people in US cities are already car sharing. And in San Francisco, 50% of the people using ride-hailing apps now share their trips with another passenger who's a stranger. Instead of spending $9,000 a year on your own car, when we combine car sharing and ride-hailing and buy a seat in a shared autonomous vehicle, we can get door-to-door transport at the speed of private car travel for the cost of a subway ticket. This transforms people's access to opportunity. Car sharing eliminates the need for parking. Ride sharing reduces congestion. We will only need 10% of the cars we have in cities today, even at peak times. No more on-street parking, no more parking garages. If most of the AVs in cities are shared cars in which people can share trips. We can widen sidewalks, plant trees, put in bike lanes and benches. We can get rid of parking lots and build affordable housing, or public parks, or whatever. Establishing the criteria and priorities for newly available public land will be critical to making sure communities get what they need. We could also reduce air pollution and CO2 emissions as we move from gas to electric power for our cars, but only if we demand that this new incremental electric energy use be renewable. Happily, electric AVs will pay their fair share for road and bridge repair because we will have made and created new user fees that apply to them. We'll discourage empty zombie cars and make it more expensive to drive than to park. But wait, what about all those people who used to drive, repair cars, pump gas, design, and build cars for a living? They worked hard and their jobs disappeared almost overnight. We need to make sure that people can diversify their income with benefits that are portable and apply no matter how few hours you work. And we need to start piloting basic income. So if we want heaven and not hell, we have to start working together to get the right laws and regulations in place now, especially for the first cities that set the example. Just as your head is reeling from the impact and potential for self-driving cars, realize that this is just the tip of the big automation iceberg. Automation delivers enormous productivity gains without the associated labor. It's like making honey without the worker bees. How will we distribute this new kind of honey? Automation gives us reason to reconsider how, why, and where we tax, and to think anew about what kind of world we want to live in. So let's talk. Please contact me.
I realized I talked really fast. We have a long time for questions to come. So.
Thank you, Robin, so much. So I think in most of these sessions up till now, there's been a little bit of a warm-up for the audience. It's required the facilitator to ask questions. But I think in this case, when you and I talked beforehand, you had a question you wanted to start off with by posing to the audience.
I do. I have to stand up, though, so I can see you. So here's my question for you guys. I'll pose the question, and then you'll know when to vote. So the question is, do you think that existing companies and existing countries, governments, will evolve fast enough to address climate change and income inequality, or will they go too slow and that people will rise up and revolt? So the question at hand is, do you think the future is evolutionary one with companies and governments, or revolution? So now I need everyone to close their eyes. This is an anonymous vote. I'm checking to see if eyes are closed. Okay, evolution, future, raise your hands. Okay, hands down. Revolution, raise your hands. Could you please keep your hands stretched high? Everyone open your eyes. This is about 70 or 80-20. 70, 30, 80, 20. And what I want to say about that is I'm trying to encourage you guys, is none of us want revolution. Obviously, we don't want revolution. But you should know that everyone and those around you realize that the status quo and the status quo pace is totally, wholly inadequate. And so I'm encouraging you to think that you have your fellow evolutionary revolutionists around you. And we really have to move faster and harder for the things we care about, because there's a lot of agreement. I've been asking this question of people around the world, and I'm getting mostly 90-10 for revolution. So it's really time for fast-paced change and against the status quo, against where you think we can't do it, we can't make those changes, this is what it is. You have a lot of people around you who are ready to change as well. So
I think we have 2 microphones if people want to step forward. I'm going to ask one question while they do, though, Robin, which is, as the video was playing, I was sort of scribbling down some questions to ask you and then crossing them out as quickly as I scribbled them because you were answering them in the video. But one of the questions that I think about a lot with regard to artificial intelligence and automated vehicles is this question of what happens to the jobs. And you know, as you just posed the question, can we evolve fast enough? You know, certainly universal basic income is, but that to me is, my concern has always been, how does that address a sense of self-identification with the job?
I think it's for me one of the, so I've been watching jobs evolve, and when I think about this Peers Inc. structure, one of the things I've been saying is everything that can become a platform is going to become a platform because these platforms learn faster, grow faster, and adapt faster. So it's happening, it's going to happen everywhere, and self-driving cars is one example of this. So what's happening, and I think in the US, a number that I have is I think 36 million people already today are not working in full-time job with benefits. They're not earning their incomes that way. Yet we have surrounded our laws and our workplace rules and our social safety nets around the idea that people have full-time jobs with benefits. So coming to your question, there's a lot of benefits to working this way. And so people already are working in multiple ways. And when we work in multiple ways, what happens is I can do here's a sentence. My father had 1 job in his lifetime. I'll have 5 jobs in my lifetime, and my children have 5 jobs at the same time. And you can start recognizing that already, can't you? That people are doing 2 or different things to get enough. And we don't think of monthly income, we think of revenue streams. And so I think there's a lot of upsides to working this way, and people are already working this way, that I can have a diversified income. I'm not either employed or unemployed. I will have jobs that are my passion jobs, and I will have jobs that are my money jobs. And it could be that my passion job, I start out not very good at it, but I like it, and I become really good at it because I really do like it, and I can start earning money in that. I just read yesterday on Twitter, I like Airbnb relative to Uber, and I still think it's an imperfect example of one of these companies. But Airbnb has just launched this program where people can sell more than their home. They're selling, I'm a good cook, I'm going to teach you how to cook Italian food. I know a lot about history, and I'm going to take you on walking tours. But what I liked about that conceptually is people have passions, and can we amazingly let people earn an income on their passions instead of what happens today, which is, do I take care of my 2-year-old, or do I do the $7.50 an hour job? And our economies have said, you do the $7.50 an hour job. So there's 40% of the people who are doing work that's dumb work. So I feel like I'm not worried about people being bored and at home, because I think this will be a gradual transition, and we'll start doing more things. Although I did ask a taxi driver, I always ask taxi drivers what they think about the future of self-driving cars, are they diversifying their income, what would they do? And when I ask car drivers who are in their 50s and older, they aren't diversifying their income, they only drive. And do you have any hobbies? Like, are there things you like to do? No. I work all the time, I go home, that's it. And so I do think it's true that we have to start making a culture of diversified interests as well. That was a long answer, sorry.
Who do you see as in your 2 depictions of hell and heaven, and how we went back to a world where we all owned our own autonomous vehicles, and in heaven, you actually skipped the question of who owns those vehicles. And it's one of the things I think also that's come up is, as we move to this world where data is everything, it moves up and up, the value moves up and up the chain and gets increasingly concentrated.
Well, so if we think about ownership, for many objects, the reason I own it, and my car would be an example, is because I want to make sure I have it all the time. I want to make sure that it's there for me at every minute. And I just want to point out to you, who does not need a car to get to work? Okay, those of you, keep your arms up, keep your arms up. Do you own a car? Okay, those of you who don't need a car to get to work and are owning a car, you're paying $25 a day to have that option of being able to drive. So 5 days a week, when you're going to and from work, not using a car, $100, $125, gone. And because that's how much you're paying for the optionality that at any minute, at any second, I could go get in a car. We pay $6,000 a year for that option of being able to drive anywhere. What we're learning through the internet and through our smartphones and through apps is that I'm starting to feel more comfortable that, whoa, that thing I wanted, I can get it right away. I don't have to own it. We can think about Spotify. Like, I don't have to own CDs. I don't ever have to own it, because when I want it, I can have it. So I think we are moving, because of technology, we're able to move to where access is more important than ownership. And that is, if I think about our future, we really need to start multi-purposing and everything and getting much more value out of it and consuming less.
So I'm going to be very honest here. So I thank you for the talk, but I came in here really excited, and then I got really depressed when you showed the climate information. So I'm still pretty freaked out. But you did show us the 3 miracles. So I'm just going to ask you, can you connect the dots a bit? I'm not asking for a Hollywood ending and make me feel great.
So let me tell you some peers, Inc. in the climate space that are making me less depressed. Among them would be off-grid electricity and the percentage of electricity that is now being generated hyper-locally. And so I see that as a peers, Inc. for sure. So I think we don't want our future. It's just Robin, solar panels on Robin's house. That's OK. But better is Robin's solar panels on Robin's house connected to a grid where I can substitute for other people. That is happening. And so that would be one example. There's an NGO that I love, 350.org. And 350.org has done a huge amount of things where they have been the platform and engaged hyper-locally individuals to fulfill. So I think it's 5 years ago now, they started the divestment movement of fossil fuels. And so they did the research. They said, here's the financial statistics, here's the CO2 statistics. Let's start we'll give you the fact sheets, we'll do some press, but you individually, in your university, in your NGO, in your town, you have to go and work with your particular entity to make it to divest. And that has been wildly successful. I think like $7 trillion worth of stuff has been divested. If I think about I'd say car sharing and in the transportation sector, it's making me very, very happy that I think we're actually moving that way. So I guess fundamentally, and it's the reason I wrote the book, because I was deeply depressed. There's more, let me tell you one more that I love, something called Global Forest Watch. I was just telling this to a person who's doing some work in Malaysia on sustainable economies that have a lot of timber and lumber involved. Global Forest Watch went and got satellite data from NASA, something that you and I don't have access to, and then they got they talked to governments, who owns this particular lot of land, how is it zoned, and they mapped, so they're sweeping around the world with satellite data, and you can draw a geofence, and it will tell you, geofence to watch, and it will tell you if there's any deforestation or fires in your geofence, and then you can go online and you can see who owns that land and what it was zoned for. And that has had huge impacts in Brazil, where the pace of deforestation has dramatically reduced, because now local guys have access to very fancy assets. And same thing in Malaysia around a lot of burning for palm oil fields. So it's this peers in collaboration where the big guys are doing the heavy lifting that is incredibly expensive and asking hyper-locally on the ground to make the movement.
So the sharing economy or peer inc that you described, and particularly at the retail level, bed sharing, car sharing, makes sense when you look at it strictly from the practical standpoint. I need to get from point A to point B. I need a place to stay tonight. But as humans, we're not just practical, right? We have, you even mentioned about passions. We have passions. I own classic cars. I have a great passion for classic cars. I don't drive my car just to get from point A to point B. I find the pleasure in driving the car. People don't own homes just to have a place to sleep at night and a place to cook. We build big homes. We build small. People are introverts. They're extroverts. They may not be comfortable with sharing. How do you bring the human element into what you're seeing in the future and address and deal with the reality of there's a portion of our society that isn't going to accept this or isn't going to be comfortable in that type of an economy?
A couple of answers to that. I don't see it being illegal for you to own and drive your own car for a long time. So you get to do that. Meantime, those of us who live in cities and adopt first, I won't be spending $9,000 a year on my transportation. I'll be spending $3,000 a year. I will have a cheaper apartment because I won't have to get parking with it, and I'll spend 25% less on my housing. But it won't be illegal for you to do that. What struck me with Zipcar is that when I did it, there was this great call in 2000. I was on hold to speak to the president of Progressive Insurance, and I was with his assistant. And she said, "So what do you do?" And I described it to her, and she's in Houston, and she said, "Honey, that ain't never gonna work." And I thought, yeah, you know what? In Houston, that ain't never gonna work, or a long time coming. So, but we can look at that, and I can tell you that every dense urban city around the world, everyone knows that the future of cities is no personal cars in them. That's a fact.
And I understand that.
Right. So let me keep coming back. So I think that, number one, economics drives decisions way more than anyone wants to realize. And so I think economics is going to drive a lot of the decisions. And then let's talk about the passion piece. I'm making up some numbers. In 1940, if I were 19 or 18 and you said, "Robin, what do you want to do with your first $1,000? It'd be get my own car." Because I was trapped inside my parents' house. I had no freedom. That was like the number one thing. That was my status. Was it cool? Was it whatever? That meant I was cool. Today, Zipcar's done surveys, and it's number 10, buy my own car, because my status is created in a huge number of other ways. So my status is, how cool is my smartphone? How many did I create things that went viral? Am I the leader in my friends? How many friends do I have? When I tweet something, who follows me? That my status and my pleasure is less and less derived by physical objects. Or I don't want to say wholly, but before, 100% of my status was by what I showed, by how much I could buy. Today, it's a much smaller fraction. I think it'll be an increasingly small fraction of my status being elevated in this. And we need to, I was telling my children, I think marketing is everything. And so marketing has told people that the car is freedom, yet every one of us know that the car is, the first 2 hours I work is to pay off my car. And I'm certainly not enjoying my drive to work because I'm driving congestion. So marketing is everything. And I think what is our greatest value in life? It's, did you have a great time with your family and friends? How many friends do you have? And are you spending really fun times with them? And I think we can be doing more marketing to elevate those things that actually are better when we go towards this future that needs to be a totally different economy and wholly sustainable.
What do you think is the biggest hurdle for bringing self-driving cars to the roads? Legislation or technology?
It's interesting. I'm reading a lot. I try to pay attention to all of the consulting reports that say, here's what the trends line looks like, here's how the adoption curves look. And they had these adoption curves that are, 25 years from now, 80% of the cars will be autonomous. And I look at that and think, you are crazy. It's be way sooner than that. But I think where this difference lies is more than 50% of the planet is living now in dense urban areas. in those dense urban areas, autonomous vehicles, there's these things called levels of success in self-driving cars, and level 5 is what you think of, that it can drive anywhere at any time without anybody. That's called level 5. Level 4 is it can drive without a steering wheel, but in specific geographies. So I think that this future, what will come sooner is this level 4, where it's going to be geofenced. You can drive in Houston, anywhere in Houston, and the road that goes out to the airport. That's all going to be good. And it's going to be good when it rains, and it's going to be good at night, and it's going to be good all the time. And I think that will happen. I want to say city number 1. I'm not going to say which city that is. City number 1, I expect us to see a 100-car pilot within 3 years in one city. And if I'd been doing my longer AV talk, and I'll get to your question about what's the impediments. So the first year, city number 1, Las Vegas, will put in 100 cars. Who will drive them? Tourists and students and late-night workers. In year 1, no one will die. There'll be lots of operational problems. They'll fix the operational problems. They'll add in 1,000 cars. And in years 2 through 5, everyone in that city will have had the opportunity to A, see them, B, drive one because your personal car will have broken down, or you're changing, your car broke, you got a new job, you're changing apartments, and you will try it. And it's going to be economics that pull you to do it. So you're going to say, wow, that was simple, door-to-door, whatever. So economics is going to make consumers choose it, and economics is going to make people who run taxis, shuttle buses, school buses think, 35% of my cost right now are drivers, I'm ditching them. So that's years 2 through 5, and in years 3 through 5, I'm Boston. I can't say, whoa, Las Vegas is doing this successfully, but we're not going to. We're not going to be an innovative, cool, front-running city. Of course. So when the first city does it, and they are successful, and it works, all the other cities are going to have to do it. And that's actually kind of what's happening today. So around the regulation, there's this tension between states and cities and governments that want to be the first ones to get this market, because it's going to be this gigantic, everyone realizes it's going to be completely transforming everything, and they want to be the front ones, and this anxiety around safety and danger. And it's an incredibly fascinating safety and danger argument, because let me give you another fact. I know way too many facts since this is my realm. In the last 2 years, we've seen in the US, there's been an 18% increase in car deaths in 2 years, 18%. And that means we're now at 36,000 deaths. And just yesterday or 2 days ago, I was talking to a guy who headed the National Highway Safety in the US. He thinks 2017 is going to come out at 40,000 deaths. And it was 35,000 in 2016. So it's just like crazy. So there's this tension between what makes something safe, what is safety, is it a better driver than you, in which case I think we should put them on the road. And so we're really quite close to that.
Regarding car hacking and cyber terror, and your thoughts on how that could affect the sharing economy.
Yeah. A fun fact is that I grew up in the Middle East, and I have been in lots of very scary situations. And my father, who was an American diplomat, used to say, if they want to kill you, there's always going to be a way. And so back when I lived in places, the lockdown has been slow and progressive. And so we've seen that no matter how much we do cybersecurity, if I want to be killing you, I'm going to find a way. And I just want to say that today, right now, there's ways to destroy economies and kill people, which is what we've seen with cars today. Cars today in Cannes. There's many places where I can take a car and fill it up and go kill a whole bunch of people. That can happen right now today. The issues around cybersecurity are issues in banking. They're issues in finance. They're issues in all sorts of cell phones. So I want to say, in the autonomous vehicle arena, it's clearly incredibly important. Everyone is thinking about it. And it's no less important or more important than making sure people don't kill you with their car today, or we don't take down the banking system, or planes. Like, it's an issue, and people are paying close attention to it. I don't think it's not particularly different from that. You guys are kind of in a stunned silence. Yes?
So, the video addressed the disruption a bit and the people that, whose jobs will go away as this automation takes place. Do the companies, leading the way on this transformation have an obligation to participate in whatever the potential solutions could be for these people who are going to be displaced?
This is a really interesting question. And what strikes me is when we make a company pay, it's typically the company that's laying off workers. But if I never hired a driver, and now I'm putting autonomous vehicles on, am I responsible for the people who I never hired, who are never under my responsibility? So I think that's how this disruption is actually going to happen, is that the disruptors aren't going to be the ones who ever hired people. So I've a couple of recommendations. So number one, I've been talking to labor organizers in the transport sector and anybody I can in the labor environment and say, here's this really scary big thing about to happen. You guys have to deal with that because I'm trying to deal with transportation and land use. So one, it's definitely not my area of expertise. Where my recommendations have been is I think that starting today, right now, we should be building something I'm calling a worker security fund. That if your service uses a driver, we should apply a 0.05% tax on that, and that we should be starting to put together a pool of money that will now be available when we have to start paying off and for people who are losing their jobs. And it's not going to be easy how that money is dispensed, because the other thing I've noticed is every time I get in a taxi in cities around the world right now, I'm asking them, those drivers, do you think self-driving cars, how soon is that happening? And 50% of them, 50% said, psh, no, never gonna happen, you always need me. And the other 50% is, no, I have started to think about it. And then I say, are you diversifying your income? Yes, they are diversifying their income. So I think part of this we need to do is we also need to start telling people, heads up, this is happening. Here's the timetable, here's how it's gonna happen. Start diversifying. And of course we have retraining, but the bottom line that I won't say that many people in Silicon Valley say is they say, oh, when we have this new technology, it starts new jobs, and with new jobs, it opens all the new windows, whatever. And I would say that is, I want to say a lie, but I want to say that is a Pollyannish untruth, because the individual working in a specific geography with specific skill sets is not going to find that job, meaningful job, in the next year or 2 or 5. And so we have to recognize that, which is why I also am wanting to have more universal basic income pilots, because that 55-year-old who is not going to be retrained, who is in Indiana, who, we can look at past transitions and they have been brutal and horrible with lots of suffering, and I think we should do a better job. So I'm trying to be overt, trying to get as many people into the conversation as possible. I'm not the expert, and I don't know. We need good ideas.
I want to push back on the question, the answer you gave to the previous question about cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. If I heard correctly, you said you didn't think it was that much different than someone could just take their car. If they're bent on hurting someone, they can do it. Same thing with cyber. But let me give you an example that the Department of Defense faces hundreds of thousands of hacking attempts, per month. Doesn't face hundreds of thousands of people with guns attacking the Pentagon. Likewise, all organizations are facing hack attacks. We rarely have incidents of terror or even workplace violence or even any kind of violent crime. With cybersecurity, hackers or miscreants or whatever you want to call them, they can do this from their basement, they can do it from their home. It's remote, there's little possibility of apprehension, and there's no possibility of physical harm to them. Or if you're going to attack someone with your car, like you see on London Bridge, you know, a couple months ago, someone's going to, you know, you're going to get killed, you're going to get apprehended. You really have to be a zealot to do that. Where with cyber, all you have to be is a malcontent. So how would you respond to that?
So two pieces. I've been having an ongoing conversation with a man named Bruce Schneier, who is an expert in the cybersecurity arena. And we've been talking about whether the code behind these vehicles should be open source or not. And does open source make it more or less hackable? And so, yeah, many eyes find those bugs. So there's a good reason to have it open source. And again, that's not my best area of expertise. I know a lot of people do it, and I've been trying to raise this as an issue for them. Should it be open source or not? And the other piece with manufacturers that I have been raising is that within the vehicle itself, I think there needs to be a hardwired, no connectivity required button that says, let me out now. Let me out the safest possible place now. And it doesn't need to be, there's a cyber attack. It could be, my child just threw up. Please stop the car, let me out. Or I saw my best friend, I don't want to go to the thing, I want to get out. You know, but we need to have a control inside the car that has no connectivity with anything that would abort and override any other things that says, let me out now. So those are just two separate things. But it's not unthought of. People are thinking long and hard about it.
So can your pure ink be looked at like a toolbox to solve some intractable problems like infrastructure? It take a whole new approach to some traditional problems that obviously the existing plan, I'm not sure, well, there isn't a plan for infrastructure, but can you fix infrastructure with pure ink?
A talk that I gave so many years ago, 6 years, so I had this sentence that I really loved, is if you think about collaborative production was talked about maybe 10 years ago. We were talking about collaborative production all the time. And when I was thinking about collaborative production, I thought, oh my God, Zipcar is collaborative consumption. But further, Zipcar is a collaboratively built and collaboratively paid for infrastructure. So Zipcar has 35,000 cars around the world, a fleet, which is a type of infrastructure that was collaboratively built and collaboratively financed. And that, for me, has been such a beautiful thing. And I'm deeply interested in wireless mesh networks, which is what Venium is doing. And so wireless mesh networks is in its, this is really skimming, is imagine that your wireless device that you paid for by yourself is a router like a mini cell tower. And so all of us in this room are creating a wireless infrastructure by each of us purchasing our own device. And so that's a concept that I'm totally fascinated with. How can each of our individual purchases that we make for our own well-being add to the collaborative infrastructure? So I think that there's, and when we think about the solar renewable grids, it has an element of that, is that each of us is paying for the infrastructure instead of having to do it in a big way. So I am totally fascinated by that as an idea. Wait, this one first, because you came first. Wait.
Well, this is sort of a continuing of that. So any future for water? Because I see that happening in electricity and all that great stuff, but water is so physical.
So back to what I didn't tell you about the Global Forest Watch, is that it was produced by a company on which, an NGO on whose board I sit, the World Resources Institute. And the World Resources Institute produced Global Forest Watch, and they've also produced something called Aqueduct, which is another water platform that does risk analysis for industries or developments that tells you, here's all the water flows and the water inflows and outflows in your arena, and here's how much it can support. So are you at what kind of risk is that? So it's a certain aspect of the water that is collaborative. But right now, we have certainly made it uncollaborative, haven't we? And so we have, so coming back to my last question, my question to you. so much of what we built today is wrong, right? And so much of that, and the regulatory aspect of it is wrong, and it's codified non-multi-purposing of things. It's codified the non-sharing of things. And it's making our transition to a sustainable future that much harder. And so in water, in some places, and if you know water, which I don't, but I was just listening to a podcast, that it's illegal in some area to collect my own rainwater, because whoever owns the groundwater owns the rainwater. And so when I collect, I'm doing something illegal. So there are all these rules that we have set up that are for the wrong things.
I was just curious, with your experience with Zipcar, I'm sure you were collecting a lot of data on the usage, travel times, distance, et cetera. And I was just curious if you learned any cultural or behavioral things that probably were different than you probably forecasted or projected or assumed.
Mm-hmm. Yep, when I was raising money, and I think even today, people think, oh yeah, that's great for college students. Like, that's great for these millennials. And from the very outset, one time we used to do in-office trainings in the first 9 months. And I remember people signed up, and I remember seeing this group of people, and I watched who came up for training, and then I was just walking by, and I had to call my board member and say, you won't believe who's in this room. So, Zipcar has people from in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, representative all along. It's overrepresented a little bit in the 20s. It's underrepresented in the, I want to say, 35 to 45 category when people have young children. Otherwise, there's people all throughout. And then it used to be thought that it was only college-educated people that did it. Income is irrelevant. So you could be, didn't matter how much money you had, it mattered how much education you had. I'd say that's still largely true. I used to think that was a proxy for access to the internet, perhaps. I do think it's a proxy for some of the things around status that we had talked about, and worse yet, doing the financial analysis. So while instead of being 99% college educated, I think it's now like 87 or 86%, that it's backing off that a little bit. An interesting thing, if you want to know when the most used moment for cars is, can you guys make some guesses in your brains? It's Saturday, 12 to 1 is the peak car moment. And Saturday, if your reservation were to overlap Saturday 12 to 1, and you tried to, PM, if you try to do that late, you probably won't find a car. So that was an interesting piece. The other piece, just from a business perspective, an entrepreneurial perspective, is that when I started and people wanted me to say, oh yeah, go after college students, a key piece that I was firm on, that I firmly understood and I was correct, was that in order to multi-purpose this asset, I needed a diversity of people using it. And that if I chose any one segment of the population, I was going to have hours that were empty, right? So Zipcar and this shared asset firmly relies on a diversity of use. We need the diversity of people's age groups, life phases, business, personal. You need to have that huge diversity of use to make use of this asset fully. So it's another place where I feel like diversity plays in so well to making anything healthy. Any more?
Josh, Robin, thank you very much for this. Robin, you have so many ideas in so many different directions. As I said, a brilliant mind.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And Josh, you did well. You did well. That actually brings our conference to a close. I hope the last 2 days have been stimulating for you, growth opportunities, both intellectually as well as your network. I hope you can bring a lot of good ideas back home and to begin to crowdsource a lot of ideas and actually crowd implement these things. This conference doesn't happen by accident. A lot of good people put a lot of good thought into it. So are there members of the program committee that are here? If so, I would like them to stand up. All right, all right. I know there was a lot of structured meetings, and I know there was a lot of unstructured panic when speakers canceled or didn't come through, and a lot of extra work. So thank you very much for putting on a fantastic show for us this week. Specifically to this part of the conference, as well as throughout. On the app, there's the feedback. That really helps the program committee. In fact, the program committee is going to be meeting tomorrow to both kind of do a look back at this one and begin to look forward to next year. So make sure you fill out those surveys, get us some good information so we can make next year's better. And the last thing I need to say is tonight we have our closing ceremony. It's down at the Frontenac. Buses are going to start leaving around 7 o'clock from the Hilton lobby. But if it actually has stopped raining, it's a beautiful walk. If you haven't done it already, if you've been too dedicated to learning here, you haven't gotten outside, it's a nice walk down the hill. You hang out, take a right, then go down underneath the bridge and follow the street all the way down. Otherwise, plan a nice walk. There's a boardwalk down there you can enjoy along the river, so it should be a beautiful night. So thank you very much for coming out and engaging with us, and have a fantastic evening.